Welcome to the 2025 Acquisitions End of Year Setup Workshop. And as I said, the real idea behind today's session is that we are going to be getting your acquisitions account ready for closeout. We'll not actually be doing closeout today. I will walk you through what that process looks like so that you kind of know what to expect. For those of you who are new, we do have a couple of people who are new to acquisitions this year. So you'll get an idea of what's to come. The actual closeout really depends on what your library does, but most libraries will close out right around the time that they move into the new fiscal year. So we usually do our sort of group workshop on that in early July. I will send out sort of an interest form or email or post on Basecamp most likely to sort of gauge when people would like to do that. But it's usually late June or early July. So today, what we're going to be doing is kind of walking through the housekeeping and cleanup process. Some of you may be ready to do that as we go, and I will build time in to allow you to do that. Some of you may not really be prepared for that, and that's all right. You can do that at any time between now and when you actually close out for the year. But it's always good to kind of think ahead to what those steps are going to look like. And of course, you can continue ordering even after doing this process, even after the cleanup process. This is just kind of the first step in getting you ready to close out. So before we dive in, are there any questions about what to expect, what you need to kind of be prepared for today, or just general questions about acquisitions that you'd like to ask before we actually get into it? And feel free to unmute yourself. It's not a webinar. It's just a regular meeting, so you have the ability to unmute yourself to ask questions or put them in chat, whichever you're more comfortable with. All right, well, we will go ahead and get started. So today, the main thing that we're going to cover is resolving your purchase orders and invoices, figuring out what you still have outstanding, what maybe needs to be canceled or deleted versus what you're waiting on and expect to get. We'll talk about the reports that you'll run as part of your end of year cleanup process that, you can run some of them before getting started on the resolving, and then rerun them afterwards. And then you'll probably also want to do another run of those as you get closer to the closeout. And then we'll talk about some of the things that you'll look for as you're preparing to close out in terms of your actual funds, and thinking about your encumbrance rollover setup. Most of you will probably make no changes at all, but this is a good time to think about what you want to happen to your funds next year and making sure that they are set to do that. And then we will also talk about, if we have time, what the process of deactivating your current funds are, and kind of taking a look ahead at what that process is going to be like when we get to the closeout later this year. And we will go ahead and do a dry run so that you'll see what that looks like if you are new to this process. All right. We probably won't talk a whole lot about the New Year setup, but we can touch on it if people have questions. So before we get in, let's talk about what the fiscal year closeout actually is, especially for those of you who have not participated in this process before. What do we mean when we talk about closing out your fiscal year? Primarily what we mean is that you are going to make sure that every item that you have ordered over the course of this fiscal year is accounted for within your fund records, and that you are prepared to start ordering for next year. The first step of that is to go through this year-end checklist, and we do have this in our knowledge book. It's fairly small, but it is helpful, especially as you're getting used to the process. Since it's a process that you only do once a year, it may take a few years to get used to it. The first thing you're going to do is, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is activate and delete pending purchase orders. So when it's time to close out, you really don't want to close out pending purchase orders, meaning those that have been created but not yet activated. So you either want to make sure that those are ordered and accounted for prior to closeout, or if you are not going to be making that order next year, it's usually best to just remove that one. Make sure that everything that you have received has actually been marked as received. Make sure that everything is invoiced, that if it's going to be paid in the current fiscal year, make sure it's been invoiced prior to the closeout. And then close any open invoices. So once those invoices have been complete and the payments have been made, make sure you're closing everything. And then also, if your library engages in any sort of ordering freeze, sort of a date at which you can no longer order before the end of the fiscal year, set those dates, make sure you know what they are. So that's your year-end checklist, and that's really what we're kind of going to be going through today. The year-end procedure itself involves basically creating your funds for next fiscal year, which you may do simply by propagating your existing funds, or you may be creating them from scratch, rolling over any encumbrances if that is something your library does, and deactivating your current funds. And all of this can be done in a single step depending on what your process looks like. And we'll talk about that a little bit today and a lot in the summer. So this checklist, and I will put the link to it in the chat, is a good reference point for you to come back to as you are preparing for this closeout. So closeout is really just the process of ending one fiscal year and starting a new one. And that is primarily something that happens at the fund level. Many of our libraries do create new funding sources each year, and that certainly can be part of the process. And obviously, purchase orders and invoices are part of the process because you want to make sure that where those link to your funds are being addressed, but the real closeout is happening within the funds. So that's where all of this kind of centers around. So the first thing that you need to do to prepare for this, and this is why we do this early, because this can be a time-consuming process depending on what your situation is resolve your purchase orders and invoices. And this may be an ongoing process. We'll start it today, but you'll probably be doing this continually between now and when you actually close out. And it's just making sure that everything's accounted for. Since the closeout is all at the fund level, what you're really doing here is making sure that your funds are complete, that all money that is meant to be drawn off of those funds has been spent, and any money that is actually going to be spent off of next year's funds is not being mixed up with this year's funds, basically. So that's what the main process of what we're talking about today is. It's resolving your purchase orders and invoices. So with purchase orders, you have basically two options prior to the closeout. You can either activate them and ensure that everything is ordered and that you're able to pay for them this year, or you can delete them. So essentially what you're doing is you're looking for any purchase orders that have not been activated yet, and you're determining, is this something I'm paying for this year, or is this something that I will be paying for next year? And if you intend to pay for it this year, you want to go ahead and activate it, ideally as soon as possible. If it is something that you'll be paying for next year, then you want to put it to the side, essentially by deleting it and then starting with new purchase orders next year so that the funds that you're connected to are accurate. Because if you've started a purchase order this year and you've gone ahead and linked your line items to funds, and those funds get closed out before you activate the purchase order, that purchase order won't activate. So it's better to remove the items from it and delete that purchase order and then create a new one next year than to kind of deal with the headache of switching all the funds, which can be both time consuming and also can be kind of tricky when there's a closeout in between. If you do have things where you have sort of a rolling purchase order that you don't intend to purchase this year, but you've been putting sort of wish list items on it, it might be a good idea to create a selection list for that just to hang on to them. We don't generally recommend selection lists as your main acquisitions vehicle. They certainly work that way, but um, they don't always translate beautifully to a purchase order. But a selection list can be a good way to kind of keep track of items that you know you want to purchase next fiscal year, rather than in a purchase order that could cause problems if it is still sitting there open prior to the closeout. So the first thing we're going to do is look at purchase orders. After that, we're going to take a look at invoices, but let's start with the purchase orders. So the first step with purchase orders, you can go ahead and run a report, and I'll talk about the reports in a minute, but it's also really easy to just do a search to see what you have in terms of purchase orders. So that's where we're going to start today. And really what we're doing is from this purchase order interface, you're going to run a search for purchase orders at your either system or branch, wherever you do your ordering from, with a status of pending. So today I'm going to go ahead and look at Cumberland HQ, and I think I used them last year too. You guys do a lot of ordering, so you always have a lot to work with in our next database. And don't worry, I think I saw Casey on here. Don't worry, I'm not actually doing anything to any of your stuff, so don't worry that I'm going to mess it up. I've got my agency in, and now I'm going to put them in status of pending. So these are those purchase orders that have been started but have not yet been activated. And I'll do my search for it. And so this gives me a very quick and easy way to pull together a list of those purchase orders that are in that pending state. So the first thing that I want to do here is go through these purchase orders and determine essentially, what do I want to do with these? Is this something that we have like a delay or a back order situation that I'm aware of with the vendor, and so I'm not going to be purchasing this year? Is this something where it turns out we really don't have the money for this, or we have some other reason we want to delay? In those cases, this is something where I probably want to make a separate list of what these items are and then remove that purchase order from the database before the closeout. Or is this something that I just have not activated yet? And if it is, figure out, what's delaying me, and make sure that activation can be done well in advance of your closeout, because you want to make sure that you don't have anything kind of hanging at closeout. So you would just kind of go through each of them and take a look, what's going on here. So this one, it looks like, I don't have any details for this. It looks like it was even a test. So this is probably one I'd want to delete. So for those of you who have never deleted a purchase order before, it is not a super straightforward process. Basically, the first thing you need to do is remove all line items from the purchase order. So the purchase order does need to be empty to be deleted. So to do that, I would just select the ones I want to delete and come up here to the action menu, and I'd choose delete selected line items. And so that empties my purchase order out. And that's what this is the state I want to get it to. And then I want to come up to my purchase order name, and I want to put delete in its in that name. And this will basically, we have a process that runs, I think, nightly, that will delete any purchase order that has the word delete in its name and that has no items in it. If you put delete in here, but you have items, it's not going to get deleted. If you remove all items, but you don't put the word delete in your PO name, then it's not going to get deleted. So it's not a straightforward process in that it seems like it should be, an option from an action menu or something. But it is a fairly simple process. So that is how you would delete your purchase orders. So this one is set for that. And in fact, if I refresh this page or redo my search, now we'll see that it has the word delete. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. By the time I'm done with this, when I conduct this search, I will have nothing pending unless it has the word delete in its name. So I would just go through each of them and sort of follow that same process. So in this case, this might be one that I want to go ahead and activate. It is activatable. Everything, all the information is in here. There's no reason not to activate it. So if I plan to order these this year, then I would go ahead and activate the order. I'm not going to go through this whole process here. Actually, I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll activate it without loading items, which I don't normally recommend you do, but just for the purposes of showing um, what your search will look like in the end. So if I redo this search, currently I have 8 purchase orders in it. Now I'm down to 7, one of which has delete. So I would do this for each of them until I get to the point that everything's activated or has the word delete. Any questions about that process? Now, this is the point where you may come across some of those kind of oddball items where, a purchase order won't activate. Maybe that's why it's been sitting here hanging for a while because you were having trouble activating it. So you set it aside and you haven't come back to it yet. So, feel free to put in tickets for those and we can work together to get to the bottom of why it's not activating. Oftentimes it's something fairly simple that's just missing from a line item. But it's possible it could be a deeper issue. So feel free to put in a ticket if you're coming across purchase orders that won't activate during this process. All right. I am going to go ahead and for those of you who are ready to at least see what you have, I'm going to give you a few minutes to attempt this search yourself. So if you haven't already, go ahead and get into Evergreen and move into the acquisition search and just kind of get a sense of where you are, how many purchase orders you have that are in this pending state. You don't need to go ahead and take care of everything right now. My guess is that a lot of you are definitely in the midst of ordering right now, so you may not be prepared to activate or delete everything, but go ahead and start kind of identifying some that you need to keep an eye on to determine if they are something that you need to delete as you move forward. If there's stuff that you need to delete, you can go ahead and get it set up for that now. If there are some that are ready to activate, feel free to activate them. It's up to you how far you want to go into this, but I'll give you a few minutes right now just to do your search. And if you come across anything odd right now, let me know and we'll take a look at it. All right. Anybody run into anything odd in doing this or struggle in any way? Okay, well, let's go ahead and move on to the next step. If you did not get a chance to complete this search or you had any trouble with it, certainly something that you've got plenty of time to do. But as you're actually preparing for your closeout, make sure that you give yourself plenty of time to prepare these purchase orders for that closeout. Okay. So next we are going to take a look at invoices. So invoices, similarly, we just want to make sure that we have a nice clear dividing line between this fiscal year and next fiscal year before we close out our funds, because once the funds are closed out, those that are attached to open invoices may become problematic. So we want to make sure that basically any invoices attached to this year's funds have been taken care of before the closeout. And what that really means is that as materials are received, that you're closing your invoices. The big thing you're looking for is invoices that are fully received but have not been closed out, and making sure that you're closing them out. So again, there are reports for this, and we will talk about those. And it's even a good idea, especially if you have quite a lot, to run the reports before you do this. But when it comes to the actual process of working through them, you can get your list very easily through a search. And then that list, of course, you can click on each of the items directly from that list. So the next thing we're going to do is run that search for your invoices. And really what we're doing is we're looking for two different things. We're going to do two different searches. The first thing that we're going to do is look for items that have been invoiced but not yet received. So what am I still waiting for? And so the way that I'm going to do this is in my invoice search. First of all, I'm going to make sure that I have my branch or my system as my ordering or as my receiver. And then I want my invoice date to not exist, my close date to not exist. So I'm looking for open invoices through this. So we'll conduct our search. And so this gives me an idea of what do I have that's still open? What has not yet been closed? And we can kind of go through these, and we can look for those items we can look for those invoices that are fully received. So we can do this by simply clicking on them and going into them. And if you do the report, you can do a report where you get an idea that's a little bit more specific as to which invoices you'll need to look at. So it is a good idea to run that report first. But basically we would come in here, we would look to see, all right, this one has been fully received. It's marked as received. And it needs to be closed, but it is not in a state that it will let me close. So let's take a look at it. It looks like this was double invoiced. So that's a weird one. And we can take a closer look at that later, but let's start with one that will work. Okay, so this one has been canceled. So we actually would want to close this one out as well. We don't want, we no longer have any money encumbered by this one. So we would want to close it. So I'll go ahead and just close my invoice. I'd make sure that everything matches with my records and all that, and I close it. And then I come back into my, I don't think I need to save after closing. Come back into my search, and I will redo my search. And it did not remain closed. And I think that this has to do with the oddness that we get from processing fees now, possibly. Still not allowing me to save. Okay, it's not showing up here anymore, so it does not need to be saved. I was right about that the first time. I think it probably, I'm not sure why it continued to show up here after the first time I closed it. It's now been officially closed, so I'm gonna close that one. So you would go through and do that, looking for those that have either been fully received or fully canceled, and if they have been, closing them. Let's take a look at one that has not yet been received. So there's nothing to do here. There's no step that needs to be taken. What you need to do is make sure that you kind of have that you're keeping an eye out for these, that as they're coming in, they're definitely being received. If you have some that are kind of oddballs that maybe you're looking at it and there's one thing on the invoice that is still marked as on order and everything else has been received, it might be worth taking a look to see if maybe something, was missed, was not marked properly or something like that. And just making sure that everything is accounted for. And if you do have a thing like that where it's not delayed, it's not back ordered, but it's the only thing that hasn't been received with a whole group that was invoiced together, might be worth reaching out to the vendor to see kind of what's going on with that item. But if it is still on order, you don't have to take any action. It's just kind of good to get an idea of what's still kind of out there pending. So you would go through and do that for these until you are basically until anything that should go ahead and be closed has been closed. And again, as I said, there's a report that you can run that will help you with this so that you can kind of have that list and check against it. So invoice cleanup is actually two sides to it. The first side is looking for these of received but not closed. The second side is the opposite of that. We're looking for items that have been received but somehow weren't invoiced. And if you work with EDI, it's rare that this is going to happen, but it may happen as the result of, if we have a server outage or something and your EDI messages didn't come through, this might happen. Usually acquisitions people are really, really good about noticing that and, let us know that that happened very quickly. And so we're able um, to restart the server and make sure that all of those that are kind of like hanging in limbo finish getting sent. But if you do have any, this is the time to find them. There also, if you don't use EDI and so you're doing all of this kind of more manually, then you may have one where you simply did not upload the invoice yet, and you want to make sure that you're getting those all taken care of. So for this, instead of the invoice search, we're actually going to go back to the purchase order search. And we are going to search for, again, our branch. And then in the next line, we are going to look for line item status. So one of the nice things about the acquisition search is that you can search parts of acquisitions that aren't within the context of the search you're in. So we're in the purchase order search, but we're going to search by line item information. So we're looking for line item status. And we want it to be our status to be received. And then we're going to add one more line. And now we're going to look for invoice. And we're looking for invoice date. And for this one, we're going to say, let's do invoice ID. We'll say is on or before today. And that should, I will say, is on or after today. All right, and so we actually don't have any that are in this state. So all of our materials that have been received have been invoiced. I'm going to remove this one. I don't like that date search. And so instead of that, what I'm going to do is no, I want to be in the line item search. That's why that was failing. I'm sorry. So my line item status is received. My ordering agency is Cumberland HQ. And I'm just going to do my search this way. And then I'm going to look for those that have okay, yes, I'm sorry. I was in the purchase order search before I needed to be in the line item search. That's why I wasn't getting my link to invoices from the grid. So these are my materials that have been received. And basically, I'm looking for those that do not have an invoice. And then I would go in there, and if I have EDI, I would send in a ticket to see why is this invoice not showing up. And if I don't have an EDI, then I would take that paper invoice that I received from my vendor, and I would create an invoice manually. And of course, there are a couple of different ways to do that. So you would follow whatever your normal procedure is for creating that invoice. All right. So basically, with that process, what you're doing is you're looking for those items that are attached to a fund that's going to be closed out this year. And then you're ensuring that the transaction has been completed, because when you close your invoice, of course, that's when you're completing the transaction. That's when the money goes from being uh, um, shows up as debited within your fund. So you want to make sure that everything is closed out as expected prior to closing your funds. And so if you do find those items that either have not yet been received, and so therefore your invoices can't be closed, you want to make sure that you are determining what the status of those items are. Are they not received because they've been back ordered? Or they not received because they got lost in shipping, or were they received but they weren't marked as received? So you need to figure out what the situation with that is. In the less likely event that you have received items with no invoice, then you need to figure out what's happened to that invoice and either create it or have it resent via EDI. And if you're using EDI, it's fairly rare that that's going to happen. But if it does, just let us know and we'll figure out sort of where it got lost along the way. All right, so any questions about the invoice search? And as I said, with invoices, you probably will want to run your report first. With purchase orders, that's kind of up to you. I know some people like to do that, and that's perfectly fine. But with invoices, I kind of do recommend it. All right, well, let's talk about those reports then. And if you do have questions about this process, we can kind of go back to it. So there are a few different reports that are useful as part of this process. They are all in our centralized reports templates folder. So I need to get out of next and I need to move into our live production client. All right. So Um, for those of you who are familiar with running reports, this process should be fairly straightforward. For those of you who don't run reports regularly, they're not difficult reports to run, so we'll walk through that process. If you do have somebody at your library who sort of does all the reports, you may want to do it with them. And of course, certainly you can reach out to me with questions. But the process for the reports, we're going to go into the reports interface from the admin menu. And because this is in the centralized reports folder, we're going to come down to our shared folders and open up templates and find the admin folder here. We'll click on the caret to expand it, and we will find centralized reports templates here. Again, we're going to expand that, and we're looking for acquisitions. We don't have a ton of acquisitions reports, so unlike most of the rest of these, there's no further expansion. You just go directly into acquisitions. And we are looking for the line items received not invoiced report and the line items invoiced but not received report. So we're going to do both of these. So we'll start with the line items received not invoiced. And I can scroll down or I can use the filter. So those of you who haven't done any reporting in the new reporter yet, there's a filter option when you're looking at the grid. If I click on it, then I have the ability to say that my name contains invoiced. I hope I spelled it correctly. All right, so this is what I'm looking for. Line items received and not invoiced. So this is sort of what we were doing with that search before, but this is going to run a report of it, and it's going to give me a list that I can then work off of. The first thing I'll need to do, of course, is clone the template, and I'm going to clone it into my training folder. And so you can, one thing I would recommend that you do is put this in for, put in a little bit of information to help you recognize it for this year. Obviously, if you're doing this every year, you can use the same clone every year, but if you clean out your reports regularly or anything like that, you may not want to. Also, it's possible in any given year that we may have updated the report. So if you're going to be cloning each year, I would just suggest that you say which year it is. I won't spend a lot of time in the template, but I'll just show you a little bit of what we can expect. So basically, we're going to get a list of the purchase orders by name and ID, the order date, the individual line items, the status of those line items, because of course we're looking for a status of received, and then information about the line items, including the title, and the ISBN, the TCN. We'll see which vendors we're looking for, and then we'll get an idea of the barcode and the potential shelving location of the item. Within filters, we are filtering on similar to what we looked at when we were doing the actual search. We're looking at the ordering agency. So again, this is going to be either your system or branch, depending on how your library has their acquisition set up. This is the big one. We are looking for a status of received. Our year is the fund year, and we'll be setting this when we actually go in and run the report. And then we just want to get a count of them in this case. Or we want the count to be our invoice entries should be 0, meaning that there are no invoices related to these items. So I'll save my template, and I'll come up here to the folder where I saved it to. And then I'm just going to double click it to run it. I'll set my filters. So we'll do Cumberland again. And we'll put in 2025 for our year. Now, do be careful with this. If you, depending on what you call your fund year, your fiscal year, this could trip you up. If you refer to this fiscal year as 2024 and you put 2025 in here, even though it's currently 2025, you're not going to get anything because all of your funds are actually set to a fiscal year of 2024. So just make sure you know what you call this fiscal year and that that's what you put in here. All right, and so that's going to run. And while that's running, let's take a look at our second one. So again, I'm going to come into the centralized reports templates and the acquisitions templates folder. And I'm going to take a look and I want the line items that have been invoiced but not received. So we've just done received, not invoiced, invoiced, not received. This is the one we want. So I will clone it. I will put it in my training folder. I will put in this fiscal year. And then we're going to come in here to where I just cloned it. And I'm going to run it. So I will run it with the same parameters. So we're looking for those that are on order. We are looking for those that are not currently encumbered, and we're looking for those that are 2025. All right, while that one runs, let's take a look at the output from the first one we ran. So I'm going to come into my output folder. I also did see that the email came to me. So this is the one we're running right now that we just set up. Now we just need to wait for my output folder to load. It goes very slowly. And then I can just open it up and take a look. And so this is going to give me a list of, these are the items that are received, but that do not currently have an invoice. And so I would want to take a look at them and figure out, what happened to that invoice. It's not a very long list. And it's mostly just multiple copies of the same two line items. So hopefully that's a quick and easy fix. Let's refresh this and see. Yep, our second one has completed. All right. So I will go ahead and give everybody a few minutes to take a look and see if they can find these reports and get them cloned and ready. Those of you who do this every year probably already have the reports saved within your own reports account. So, you don't need to go through the process of cloning them new. I have not made any changes to them. I did test them after the upgrade and they worked as expected. So the upgrade did not have any impact on them this time. Thank goodness. So if you have one from a previous year, it should run as expected. Yep. And again, not a particularly, well, actually slightly longer list, but these are those that are invoiced and not yet received, which is not, um, you know, not the wildest situation, though we are looking at some that were maybe invoiced quite a long time ago. So if you do have some of those where the invoice came through months ago, but they're still marked as unreceived, kind of going through and figuring out what's causing that holdup. Why are they still listed as on order? Was there a delay with the vendor? That type of thing. Just because you want to make sure that this stuff has been taken care of before you get to your closeout. All right, we've got a question in chat. So Casey is asking whether or not you could accomplish the same thing in terms of this invoice not received report using a line item search with line item status is not received and invoice date is after the beginning of the fiscal year. I think that would get you the same list. So yeah, if you didn't want to bother running the report, I believe that search would get you the same list. And then of course you'd have the ability to click directly into the purchase order and invoice from the results of the search. So yeah, I don't see any reason that that wouldn't work. We can take a quick look at it while those of you who are interested can set up those reports to run. Yeah, I think everybody sort of has their own preferences as to whether or not they like to have the reports. Sometimes it's useful to have the reports simply for, you run it once at the beginning, you work through the search, and then you run it again at the end to make sure it's empty. Um, but I don't see any reason that the search would miss anything. Let's do a quick look. So let's see. We're doing a line item search where line, and I am live now, just to let you know. So these will be up to date results, unlike what we were looking at before. The line item, start by making sure that we're in the right branch. Uh, Ordering agency. Line item status is uh, so we can put it in as is not received, and that's going to make sure that anything that would come through this way, you're going to get a lot of canceled things though. So just um, be aware of that, and maybe you do want to see those. If you don't, you could also do it is on order, because that's primarily what you're looking for here, because anything that's not yet on order would have been taken care of through the purchase order cleanup. Theoretically, you would have already done that, and so you shouldn't have anything that's not on order yet. So really all you're doing here is looking for things that are on order. So you could do either, depending on where you are in the process. It might be a good idea to do that is not received, just in case there's some things in an odd status. And then, of course, we'll do our invoice date is on or after July 1st. And this should match what we got in that search before. It doesn't, so that's interesting. Let's take a look at the actual invoice. All right, I want to go back to the report and see if there is a reason. Ah, you are probably right. So a single copy got canceled, so the whole item shows as on order still. Yeah, I think you're right. So that would probably be one of the reasons that this is less useful than the report, simply because you're going to have anything that's in that kind of state is still going to come through. So that might be frustrating. Um, so, yep, happy to test it. If you do end up finding a workaround for that, let me know, because I do think this would be a useful way to kind of deal with this, rather than the sort of the static report output. And maybe we'll get, you know, upgrades to acquisitions at some point that kind of deal with this issue. All right. Has anyone run into any other questions with the reports, or concerns about getting them set up? Questions about how to use them? All right. Let's go ahead and talk about the end of year procedure. So that's our housekeeping. That's the cleanup that you need to do in order to be prepared. And so basically what the next few months are in terms of acquisitions, um, in addition to just sort of the regular acquisitions work that you do, you also want to be kind of keeping an eye on these items in this status. So whether it is the, um, you know, pending purchase orders that you need to determine what to do with, or whether it is items that are the invoicing and the receiving don't match up. Basically, between now and when you close out, you'll need to get that stuff cleaned up. So um, one thing that you can do is set a hard date for when your library is going to stop ordering. And I know many of you already do that. But, if you set, say, May 31st is the last date and you're not going to order anything after that, that gives you that full month to kind of deal with everything coming in. You know your vendors and you know how long it takes to get things, so you can kind of make your decision on what that date should be. Based on that, many of you probably have no hand in making that decision, and it's given to you from your county or your municipality or whatever. So obviously, in those cases, go with that one. But if you do have a situation where you don't have any higher authority telling you when the cutoff date should be, I do recommend having a cutoff date because you do want to make sure that you don't have any of these kind of lingering items before you close out. And so you need to give time for anything that has been ordered to come in before you do your closeout. Um, I think it's possible to close out with some pending things, but it does kind of mess things up because I think you have to leave some funds open while propagating new ones, and it's harder. If anyone does that as a regular part of your process, let me know, because I'm curious how that works in kind of a real world scenario. But ideally, this is all clean before you close out, so you don't have to deal with anything kind of unusual. So let's go ahead and talk about what that end of year procedure looks like. And again, as I said, we'll meet again in late June or early July to do this for real. But for now, let's do sort of a dry run. And so, as I said at the beginning, what we're really talking about when we talk about closeout is closing out funds. So you're not closing out those purchase orders. You're not closing out your invoices. You're just closing out the funds that they are linked to. And because every line item has a fund connected to it, that's why we need to have all that stuff clean. So let's go ahead and take a look at our funds. I need to get back into Next for this. And so we're going to come into Acquisitions Administration. And for this, we'll come into Fund Administration. And so what we're looking for, of course, are funds for this year. So they're already filtered to 2025. If you do call this year 2024, then you, for some reason, Evergreen is set to automatically filter to whatever the current calendar year is. So you'll want to change this to 2024 in order to actually see your active funds. But these are my active funds, and these are all fake funds, so that's why there's only 3 of them. And basically what we're going to do here is we are going to, once everything's clean and we know that these funds are ready to close, we are going to go through the process of figuring out what we need to do to close these funds and open up new ones for next year. And for that, we're looking at propagation and rollover. So this is something that you probably have not dealt with since you set your funds up. And then maybe to some extent every year when you close them. But basically, propagation and rollover are the settings on each fund that tell Evergreen what to do with it when it's closed. Propagation recreates the same funds with the exact same settings for the new fiscal year. So, if you have an adult fiction fund every year, then that's probably something that you want to set to propagate so that when you close out the 2025 adult fiction fund, it automatically creates the 2026 adult fiction fund. It won't put any money in there, so you'll still have to do the manual process of adding money, but all of the general parameters will be set. And if you are a library that has, 25, 50, 100 funds, I definitely recommend propagating rather than recreating them each manually every year. Um, Simply because that takes a lot of time. Um, so propagation is simply recreating the same funds with the same settings next year. Rollover is, I recommend less, and I don't think very many people actually use it. Rollover will either, depending on the type of rollover you have set, will move either any unspent money into the propagated funds for next year. So if you have $200 left over in adult fiction this year, it'll automatically be rolled over into next year's adult fiction fund when you propagate, if you have rollover set to true. You can also roll over only encumbrances. And this may be a little more common. It's still kind of funky from like a bookkeeping perspective, but basically it allows you to, any money that has been earmarked but not spent can roll over into next year's funds. And so that allows it to kind of, if something has not been fully debited, if you're still waiting for materials that haven't come in, you can roll them over into next year. I don't think many people do this, but I think some do, because it does still, it's still complicated from like a government bookkeeping perspective. So a lot of your county offices don't want you to do things like this. But it's an option. So you can set these up. Now, if you set them up not to propagate, but you want to make them propagate, you can change that before closeout. So if I come into these funds here, I can see that this top one, the AV training one, is not set to propagate. So that means that when I close it out, it's just done. I don't have a new AV training fund for 2026. But I can come in here and edit it and essentially just turn propagate on. And so now when I close it out, it's going to automatically propagate into 2026. So one of the first things that you'll do prior to your closeout is just going through and making sure that the funds that you want for next year have propagate turned on, and the funds that you don't want have it turned off. So if you are changing the way that you maintain records on your juvenile materials, for example, you might want to turn off the propagation on all of your juvenile funds. Maybe you have 15 different juvenile funds, and next year you're just going to have one. So you just turn off propagation on all 15 of those, and you'll make one new one for juvenile next year. If you have grant-related funds where you don't want that to go into next year because it's done next year, you definitely want to make sure propagate is turned off for that. You can also turn rollover on and off now. So for example, I can come into juvenile training. And currently it has rollover set to yes. I can set it to no. And so now all of mine are the same, where each of them will propagate into next year, and none of them will roll over any unspent money. Currently, juvenile training has a balance stop percent set that will roll over to next year when I propagate. The others do not, so they won't next year either. You can change them after the fact. So if you don't have anything this year, but you want to have it next year, you can put it in now, but it actually, I think, probably makes more sense to go ahead and propagate them and then go through and add those balance stop percents and warnings, especially if you are a library that sort of sets those incrementally throughout the year. I would start it back over once you start your new fiscal year rather than before closing out. But that's up to you. So that's what we're looking at when we look at funds. Let's go ahead and do a dry run. This is not something you need to do right now, but if you wanted to now, just to give yourself an idea of what's going to happen this summer, you can. A dry run won't mess anything up. So you're welcome to do this as many times as you need to prior to the closeout, just to make sure everything's going to happen exactly the way you want it to. So to do a dry run, We are going to, sorry, I got caught up in the wrong thing there. Um, so we are going to select the ones that we want to close out. I'm just going to do one. And we're going to click fiscal propagation and rollover, which I think is confusing because if you have both of these set to no, then you know, it's not obvious immediately that closing them out happens from this button. So even if you have everything set to no, I still recommend a closeout because you don't want to keep your funds active from year to year. When you are done using a fund, you should close it out. And you do that by clicking the fiscal propagation and rollover button. So our context org unit is going to be whatever we had set up here when we scoped. And that should be the context for whatever you have your fund set to. So you can set it to your system and then include funds from descendant org units, and that will allow you to close out funds for multiple branches at once. I don't necessarily recommend you do that simply because I think you should kind of pay attention to each one's on its own. But if you are comfortable doing that and that's how you do it every year, you keep on going. I don't do this in the real world with real money, so I get probably more nervous than you do thinking about it. But so if you do that, that's fine. So if you wanted to do that, you would simply scope. So in this case, I would scope up here to Bunkum. Of course, PAC is the only one that has anything because I set PAC up just for training. But if I did this and I was scoped to Bunkum and I click this button, then my context org unit becomes Bunkum and I click the button to include funds from descendant org units. So I can do it that way too. Then I come down here, I choose my rollover and close out. Back to just PAC. One note is that you need to make sure that you're closing out the correct fiscal year. So again, if you called this fiscal year 2024, make sure you're set to 2024 here because otherwise it won't close out the right year. And it's not immediately obvious that it's not closing out the right year until you actually attempt to. For rollover and closeout, I would just click this when I'm ready to go. At this point, of course, I'm not ready to go. This is simply a dry run. So basically, I can check this box. It's not actually going to perform the closeout. So just be aware of that. But what we're talking about when we do this is that we're looking at what's actually going to happen. So when I've got dry run clicked, nothing's going to happen for real at first. But by clicking the perform fiscal year closeout, I'm going to get a simulation of what would actually happen. And if I don't click this button, I won't get that simulation. I'm going to click process and it's going to tell me, all right, so these are the changes that will be made if I move forward. 3 funds propagated for fiscal year 2026. That's correct. I've got 3 funds. No money rolled over. That's correct because I had all my rollover set to 0. No encumbrances rolled over because I was not rolling over encumbrances either. So this is what will happen when I close out for real. So I recommend going ahead and doing one of these kind of early on so that you can figure out what's going to actually happen, what you're looking at. If I especially recommend you do this if you do rollover. I don't think anyone on this call does, but if you do rollover, do a dry run early so that you know kind of where you are in terms of money, especially with the rollover of encumbrances. If you have a very high amount of encumbrances rolling over, it can be a sign that there's still a lot of stuff out there that is kind of in process and that you need to move through the process before your closeout. You don't want to roll over too much in terms of encumbrances. And so you want to kind of figure out what's causing a very high number if you're rolling over encumbrances. But that's the process. Of course, when you do it for real, after you do your dry run, you would uncheck that. It gives you this warning, and then you would click process, and it'll do it for real. We're not going to do that today. We're going to do that over the summer. But I do recommend doing a dry run early, just so that you get an idea of what's going to happen when the time comes. Okay, we talked a little bit already about setting dates and setting a freeze date. Um, I definitely recommend you also determine what your closeout date is prior to closing out. You don't have to do that now, but I'd say definitely by June, know when you plan to close out, because you definitely want to make sure, even if you have not frozen anything, you want to make sure that your closeout date takes into account what's been ordered and when you expect to get it generally. And then, of course, also sometime in probably May or June, I'll reach out and see when people would like to do the workshop for the actual closeout, and we can do that together so we can troubleshoot. And so if your closeout date, if you haven't set your closeout date, you don't know when you want that workshop. But it's also helpful so that, you know, people that order know that that's coming, and admin and anyone that deals with the finance knows that that's coming. So setting a closeout date ahead of time is a good idea. So we're not going to do the real thing today. Um, and so we actually won't be doing any of that today either, because we're not going to take a look at what happens after you close out. But this is what you have to look forward to. So that's pretty much the process of getting yourself ready. It's not You've got time to do it. You know, it's not something that you need to make sure that you've got everything clean today. But I would suggest that you go ahead and get started so that you kind of know what to look for if you have invoices to track down, if you have items that should have been received 3 months ago that haven't been, that you need to track down. You want to start that process now. But plenty of reports to help you, different things you can do within the search to help you figure out what needs to be tracked down. And if you do run into odd situations, you know, invoices that won't close and things like that, that gives you plenty of time to put in tickets, and we can figure out what's going on there. With the changes in invoices, I did test a bunch of stuff in preparation for today. But there are still things with invoices that I think we are finding as we're going. So don't expect it to be a super smooth process this year, and be prepared to send in tickets as you come across weird things. Any questions or concerns or anything like that? Yeah, so Casey is asking about invoice issues that were entered as bugs. I think some of those bugs have been dealt with, but I think a lot of the invoice bugs are kind of still in process. So yeah, put in a ticket with those lists, and I can kind of follow up and see where we are with the bug fixes and see if there are at least workarounds. Um, so if you have any buggy invoices, even if you've already reported them, put in a ticket. This is definitely the time to do that. Good. I'm glad to know that the newer ones are running more smoothly. My ticket volume related to invoices has decreased significantly in the last couple months. So I was hoping that meant things were going well and not just that people had given up. Um, so All right. Well, I appreciate everyone being here today. I know a lot of people will watch the recording or contacted me to let me know that they couldn't be here live but are looking for the recording. So those of you on the recording, please feel free to put in any questions, send them to me or put them on Basecamp. We've got a few months to kind of follow up on this stuff, and I'm happy to kind of walk you through whatever part of the process you need help with as we get ready for the closeout. And then sometime in late spring, early summer, I'll reach out to schedule a closeout workshop if people are interested. Of course, we don't have to do it all together. You're welcome to do it whenever you want to do it, but I do usually schedule a live opportunity for people to do that together, just in case we run into issues, we can troubleshoot them live. But thanks for being here, and let me know if you have questions as you move forward, and I will see you over the summer, if not before.
Thanks, Samantha. You're awesome.